Hello, everyone. So my name is Maria, and I'm a project leader in Appsilon, and I have a great pleasure to talk today with Agustin, Marcin, and Pedro about the apps that they created for Shiny Contest. So I would like to encourage all of you to ask questions in the comments. I will try to include them in the conversation. But first, I would like to start with a short introductions to the app that they created, so we all know what we are talking about. So if I could ask Marcin to first present his screen and share the application, it would be great if you could tell us a bit more about Shark Attack.
Yes, of course, with pleasure. Let me share my screen. The contest was last year, so yeah, we need some refresher of what's going on there. I hope that you can see it now.
1 second. Yeah, we can
Yes.
see it now.
Okay. Yeah, so this is the application called Shark Attack that I've created for the RStudio Shiny Contest 2021. It's available for you here using this link. It is deployed on Shiny Apps.io. This is the first screen that you see when you enter. Basically, it describes what the application is about, and it's about a very important topic, so cleaning up the oceans of all the trash that we as a civilization put there. There is a manual here, but like that's my job today to actually explain this personally. So let's clean. First, we will select the difficulty, and I think it's pretty self-explanatory what is what, and I will select the easiest one. I would like to accomplish game today in front of you, and it's not that easy. Okay, in the game you use the arrow keys to move your diver on the board and to collect the trash that is appearing here. You have 1 minute, that's your oxygen level, and you need to score as many points as possible while avoiding the shark attacks. Sharks are angry because all the trash that we put in the ocean. You can see it's getting like more and more. It's not easy for one diver to collect it all, also like just within 1 minute. Before the time is left and before we are beaten by the sharks, we need to go back to our submarine that is waiting for us in the top left corner. Oh, it is actually moving. Okay, so I introduced the feature that it is moving, but only in the like just beneath the surface. Okay, 10 seconds left. Let me go back quickly to my submarine with all the trash that I was able to collect. Okay, here we are. That round we scored 89 points. Actually, I wasn't paying attention what trash I'm collecting, but there are different types of this that are scored differently. The toxic waste that you can see like up here, it's the highest score. It's the most damaging for the environment. Okay, that's my first round. So this is actually my high score, and I did not qualify to the leaderboard. That's bad. Actually, yeah, there is a leaderboard, so you can compete against other players. None of this is me. I'm not like really great at this game, and I really would like to meet someone with nick I love sharks. So yeah, that's like really nice score, and the score is for each level. So this is for the easiest one. You can play again and select a different difficulty level as well. So yeah, I encourage you to go there, play. Also, the repository is public. Of course, it's available as you can search for myself and Shark Attack. There is like I think nice implementation of object-oriented programming and R6 classes there, and some CSS and JavaScript tricks. This is not everything here that you saw is possible with just pure Shiny, but most of this is just Shiny. So there are like a lot of possibilities. Also tomorrow there is my talk, and I will tell a little bit more about the process of actually doing data applications if you are interested. Okay, I think that's all for the demo.
Yes, thank you so much, Marcin. I have to say that I enjoyed a lot playing this game. I was a tester before Marcin released the application, so I already know it, but I'm happy that you had a chance to show it to the rest of people who participate in this session. So now I would like to invite Agustin.
Hey there, how are you?
Hello.
Okay, so I think I will just go ahead and share my screen so I can tell you a bit about my submission to the Shiny contest. Okay, let me know if you can see my screen now. It should work.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, okay, so here we go. This is quite a simple app, but this was intentional mostly, although this is kind of beneficial to me. But this app came to mind trying to solve one actual issue I had in real life. I like to bike a lot, and I have this kind of small tire, like really thin tire bike. So anytime you stumble upon some kind of bumpy road or cobblestone road or pebblestone road, you're really likely to just get a flat tire, and that's not fun. So I tried to find any map that could show up which streets had this kind of uneven or bad surface, and I couldn't find anything like in the web, and it was kind of okay. Maybe this information is available somewhere, and I can just kind of collate or merge this information with the current map we have of the city. And actually, I did find some really nice work made by the open community of the OpenStreetMap, and this data is available just for everybody, and this is amazing. But what it was lacking was having this information centralized in some nice map that you can access anywhere. And I said, okay, maybe I could try taking a stab at this and having sort of this new map of the city that it's kind of useful mostly for bikers. And what it started what it started as just showing which are like these bad roads, it kind of grew up to be a bit more of a cyclist map, just trying to fulfill whatever need I thought a biker might have when going on the road. So what you get on the app is actually mobile centered UI, because what I thought is maybe the most likely use case for this is not when you're at your home on your desktop computer, but rather when you're on the road and you want just to see what's going ahead on your travel. So this is why like we have this kind of mobile UI type of screen, and although it's quite simple, I think it summarizes what we kind of need as a cyclist. So first of all, the app opens. This is my city, Buenos Aires, and as you see all of these red lines. These red lines are like these bad streets that actually you can just click and see. Okay, what kind of bad street is this? Is like cobblestone road. This is the name of the street. And also you can go to the side menus and just also add these bike lanes that the government has put on for us, so you can see also this network of bike lanes. And also if you go to the other side, you can see actually spots like water faucets. Let me see if we don't have many water faucets around the city, I think. Okay, there we go. And you can also see where you can get your just an air pump if you get a flat tire or something, some parking spots that are available, and also some bike shops if you have to maybe just buy some stuff on the go for your bike. But mostly this kind of try to summarize and display everything a biker might need when on the road. Um, this is pretty much it. I think the most value that this app has is just getting this data open to the public in a easy to interact way. Technically, it's just maybe not as maybe a super app or something technically challenging, but for me it was super fun to do because it actually solved one of my actual problems. So I think maybe there is like the highest value, and I think maybe some more people, more cyclists will enjoy this.
Yeah, it is great to see your application. I feel that the reason that we were doing it for yourself, it's so well thought. So, for example, you know that you need a mobile version, you need what kind of information you want to display. So it seems very useful. I really hope we would have something like this for Warsaw. So maybe if you would like to extend your app, you can just add other cities.
Yeah, I will do. But also, like Marcin pointed out about his app, all the code is available at my GitHub here. It's super simple, but I think it kind of maybe works as a scaffold for someone in Warsaw, maybe trying to do the same, or in other city. I think it's a neat idea if you don't have already this kind of information displayed in an open map.
Great, thank you so much for sharing. So now I would like to invite Pedro to tell us a bit more about his app, Shiny Decisions.
Hi, everyone. And I can see that you can see my screen. So this was my entry 2 years ago. And kind of like Marcin, this was also a game. I don't have such a deep reason to make this as a game as Marcin. I'm just a very... I enjoy games a lot. And I think that they're a very good way of showcasing, getting people interested on a specific topic and kind of hook them into dive a bit deeper. So I thought it was the perfect opportunity to do something like this in Shiny, where people look at it, they get a bit surprised with the result, and then kind of end up diving deeper. So the game itself is very simple. It has a very tight core loop. So you have your initial screen where you can pick your difficulty. I'll pick medium, and you have basically you only interact with these cards here on the side. Everything else is just additional information, and you can basically swipe them left or right. So swiping left or right, this is the tutorial that kind of tells you a bit about the different systems. I won't spoil it too much. But eventually you start the game itself, and there's no time limit. There's no actual win condition. There's only a lose condition, which is if any of your top metrics actually gets to 0, the game is over. The objective is just to survive as much as possible. And you survive by swiping these cards left or right. And depending on the decision that you make, different metrics get affected in different ways. So swiping left, for example, here we have a message in the bottom. A shady company has been causing tiny deforestation in Australia. And I know that semantically some of these sound very weird, but they're kind of procedurally generated from a few templates and a lot of different words. But you can see here that if we start swiping to the left, 2 of the metrics in the top will start blinking. This means that swiping to the left will affect those metrics. Swiping to the right will also affect those metrics, but it doesn't really tell you how much it will affect. So you kind of need to, by the context, understand if something is going up or down. And we can do a few swipes just to get the metrics up and down, and you can see that all the metrics. And right now, my health metric is getting very, very low, so I do need to be a bit careful. This one, for example, does affect health, and if we swipe there, it goes even lower, and we actually lost. So there's a small afterlife deck as well that kind of shows what your demise was and how everything went. And if you kind of end up swiping everything, you get a game over. There's no high score, but you basically get just a number of weeks that you survived. And then you can go back to start and just do it again. Some interesting things here, similar to Marcin, I also used R6. I also create a lot of other small systems. So the health tracking, there's also a karma meter that I ended up adding as well. Like I mentioned before, all of these cards are actually procedurally generated. So there's a large amount of templates that that basically get randomly filled with different values and different words. There's a map in the background that kind of shows you how your progress is looking like. And I think that's basically it. There is one more thing. So I also wanted this to be as easy to get addicted to it as possible. So there's also a mobile version that you can use. So if you open this, there's a slightly different layout. Technically, this was also an interesting way for me to explore how we could have responsive layouts in Shiny at the time. And that's basically it. So like all the other projects, and I think most, if not all, Shiny contest entries, it is available on GitHub. You can check the code completely. Maybe there's something interesting for you. The data itself that gets fed into the game is also available. So even if you would like to make your own version of the game, you can download this, create your own version, change the text, add more stuff, and that's basically it.
Great. Thank you so much, Pedro. So now I will follow up with some questions. I will start with the questions that I can see in the comments section. So let me see. I think the first one is to Marcin. And Marcin, how would you approach to increase the FPS, frames per second, in the app?
So if I understand correctly, it is about that the game is kind of like you can see actually the objects moving like one by one. Yeah, and this is because there is some set timeout in JavaScript that is after a given amount of seconds, it is randomly selecting the next position for each object. So for the sharks and for the trash, for the diver, you are moving with the arrows. And actually what is happening right now is just that the image on one grid cell that is like underneath, under the hood, is disappearing, and on the other it's appearing. And it's like there is this really like hard switch. So some option of making this more like a transition thing, playing with some CSS there. The best option will be that it can like, as you can have on like Google Slides on PowerPoint, that is like fading into one border, the CSS background, it's fading into one border. So that border that you want to move, and on the other cell, it's like exactly synchronized to fade in into the other cell. But yeah, that at least for me, it would be challenging, and it requires like more CSS skills probably. But yeah, that's my like first idea that comes to my mind here.
Okay, great, thanks. And another question that I have for you is, can a diver pick up a power-up that gives him more oxygen when he's down?
This is a nice idea. Yeah, actually, the problem that you can have with when building such applications is that you will have like tons of such ideas for improvements, and now the problem is like what to prioritize, what to pick, also to not make this too complicated, too intuitive, and to have a time to actually finalize all the important features. I think I haven't got that idea for the power up, but yeah, nice.
You
Maybe
can
I will
always add
come
it.
back. Yeah, maybe I will come back one day.
Yeah, but I think that's the problem. Usually you have a lot of ideas and you have to just decide on the ones that you will implement. So time is also always a problem. So maybe I'll ask you this time. So how long it took you to build the app? So if you could just share more or less.
Yeah, I actually checked commits today.
Okay.
I was interested, but I started working on this on 16th of April and finalized somewhere like 20th of May. So it was like a month of really hard work. Of course, usually done like after hours or weekends. But yeah, it's not an easy thing to build something complex. Of course, the first like proof of concept you get quite early, but then there is this like impression, this magic touch that you need to add. So also things like looking for nice images to put so that it looks kind of like nice and interesting. It also takes time, and this is like not programming, it's just like googling for images and maybe cleaning them up. But it also you need to spend some time on those things.
Okay, and what about you, Agustin?
I think it was around, like, for the main features, like maybe the map and some options, maybe around 10 days. But to like get all the final details in place or polish it a bit, adding some splash screen and adding some extra functionalities, maybe around 2 to 3 weeks, just to get everything like all together for the submission. But yeah, I mean, this is technically much more simple than, for instance, Marcin's game. So obviously, like in actual developing time is a bit less.
Okay, and you, Pedro?
So the whole process probably took around like 2.5 months or something, just working in the evenings and weekends. But I think especially the first month, I didn't really touch code because I did a lot of UI scribbles and trying to figure out, just trying different POCs for the different subsystems that I wanted, just trying to organize the architecture a bit. After that, it was kind of fast to get the POC going. This was 1-2 weeks to get the initial concept actually working, and then there was a lot of time left until the actual submission. So I'm pretty sure I spent even just 2 weeks going in that spreadsheet, just adding more options because I wanted to create more options, more templates, more everything. Also tweaking the actual game because each card has a value that it will affect the metrics. So there was actually a round of refinement when it comes to some cards were too powerful or some cards were basically useless. So there was user testing here to kind of try to understand if people were winning games too fast or too slow, and what cards needed to be tweaked.
Also, when we talk about like timing for the Shiny contest, I think that was my case, and interesting. Maybe guys are sharing the similar experience, that you start with some idea, but then you will change it, like you will modify it based on the feedback, based on your new ideas. Maybe there will be like an oxygen power up thing that you will want to implement. So you need to plan like more time that you initially think that it will take, because it will evolve in the meantime. Actually, my first idea, what I started working with, is like it was like just a dashboard about shark attacks to present this on the map. And later, I decided that it is not involving. Let's make a game. But then the purpose of the game changes, because initially it was some like treasure hunting for the sunken treasures, and then I was like, no, it's not involving at all. Like you need some purpose to actually do this. So yeah, even if you have like a really nice plan of what you will implement, you need to have additional time for like changes that the idea will evolve.
So what was your plan at the beginning? Was it a week and it became a month, or I don't know if you remember.
I don't recall, but yeah, I really wanted to start really like ahead, especially because I did not join like previous contest, because I was like looking for the perfect idea and I was not able to find this. And this year, so the last year, the last contest, I decided that I will just join and I will start early with any idea that I have, and later, yeah, it evolved into something that was actually interesting. So yeah, if you plan to attend, do it like early.
Great. I have to say, the result is great. So thank you for the advice. So I can see another question to Agustin. Agustin, would you consider developing the app in an Android studio or iOS studio? Why yes or why not? Just interested in the mindset.
Okay, so yes, it would be if I knew how to program there. Just like this straightforward answer. Like I think you have to program there in C++, or there are some other programming languages that I'm not really good at yet, maybe. But actually, I had this in mind. I really wanted to kind of mimic the idea of having your icon, not my app icon, on your screen on the phone, and you can kind of do a trick, like have this on your own app, deploy on Shiny apps, and add it to the kind of as a shortcut in your screen on your phone, and you have put some manuscript there, and it kind of works. So actually, if you go to my app from your phone and just follow the instructions that are there on the help section, you can actually have this app get right on your screen, and you just, instead of maybe going to your browser and entering the URL and blah blah blah, you can just push the icon and you get directly the app open there. So it's not that I didn't think about maybe trying to go this way, but obviously there are some limitations, and most of all, I didn't think this warranted like developing a proper mobile app itself. It was more like an experiment and having some fun. So yeah, maybe for our next project.
Okay, great, thanks. It's good that you gave this tip with putting the icon of your app in the mobile. I think people can maybe later take a look at the repo and reuse it.
Sure.
And one more question that I see to you is, does your app live update in case the bad roads are repaired?
Okay, this is actually something that is technical debt to me, because this was one of the features I wanted to implement, but it didn't fit my schedule. So it actually is static right now, but the power of the data itself from the OpenStreetMap is that it's dynamic all the time, updating the state of the roads and whatnot. So it will be like the best to have this pulled in maybe every day, every week, or something like that, just to get the last state of the data. So this is kind of on the back of my head saying, okay, do it, but I still haven't found the time to implement it.
Okay, great, thank you. So now I think I'll ask the question that everyone is waiting for, at least I hope. So what tips would you give to people who want to take part in Shiny contests? So what do you think helps you win? And maybe let's start with Pedro, because I see he unmuted himself.
I think, so I don't think there's like a single recipe that will work for everything. But I can say what worked for me, which I think is important, which is you need to think of your entry as someone else is going to look at it and try to learn a bit from it. It needs to be a bit a showcase of what Shiny can do and how you could do it. So having very good code quality, very good documentation, I think is very important. Also, it's important to be unique, because just following best practices, a lot of projects follow best practices. So you kind of need to get that hook that gets people kind of interested and wowed a bit by your application. And usually a good idea is to try something different. So in my case, in Marcin, this was just doing something that isn't commonly done with Shiny, which is a game. And I think it worked very well for us. But these are just examples of things that worked. I think it's very hard to say there's a single recipe that will get you a win, but just do a good project, good quality, think that someone else is going to look at it and try to understand it and learn from it, and fingers crossed.
Great. Marcin, do you want to add something?
Yes, I want to emphasize what Pedro said about asking for feedback. For me, that was crucial. I think like all my family, all my friends, like including here in Appsilon, you played early versions of the game, and I actually collected like tons of feedback that I later implemented into game, and this was really helpful. One good example is this leaderboard that you can actually compete with other players. That was something that I introduced like the very last day before the submission, because I thought that I don't have time for this, but I heard that this will be super nice feature from like few different sources. So I decided my users are asking for this. I have to implement it. So I like stay late at night to actually deliver this. So yes, asking, letting people play like just for 3 minutes to just open it and tell you if this is intuitive enough. Also, maybe one more tip would be to make sure that you won't get stuck with the data, for example. Maybe Agustin can tell us more because he actually was using some data, but I think that usually this is like a really hard job to clean up the data, organize it, prepare it, and this won't be so visible in your submission. So think twice if your idea is worth to spend so much time on data and not deliver like the good impression. So yeah, be careful to not kind of like get into some data cleaning mess.
Yeah. I think I'm trying to recall when I was developing this. I might have spent like 1/3 of all time just preparing all the data, getting all together, because I had 2 sources. And obviously, when you have more than one source, everything starts to fall apart. You have to merge and take many cases into consideration to get everything in place. But for me, and this is maybe kind of a higher level tip, and it's obviously biased by my own experience, is to have something, an idea that really motivates you, because along the way you will surely find many obstacles, like data-wise, or you will find that there is no package for what you want, or the UI is really difficult to customize. But if you have this end goal in mind and you really want this to be done, like for me it was, yeah, I do want this map. So maybe I wake up and I say, okay, I can just go a bit into the code and okay, let's just work a little bit, just because I wanted that to be done. And I think that does obviously not guarantee to win a contest, but it surely for me is kind of required element to it. Otherwise, it's just really difficult to develop anything if you are kind of doubtful about what you're doing.
Yeah, this is something I can imagine, because when I was listening to you, I heard, a month, 2 months overtime and working after your work. You have to be motivated to be able to do it and not decide, okay, today I'm watching Netflix. This is not something I want to do.
Yeah, I have one more, if I may.
Sure.
Tip. Yeah, to what Agustin is saying, that yeah, you need motivation, definitely, but you also need like a good process of approaching this, because that work in the contest, it's something that you will do extra. So organizing your ideas, for example, in GitHub project, to have them like listed down, for me it was adding me really nice booster when I saw that, okay, this is done, I can move it, this is done. And also there are the tons of those ideas like oxygen power up. I love it. Maybe I will come back to this, but you won't be able to just work on everything at the same time. So just like noting everything, all the ideas, prioritizing them, and then you working on them separately, because like, sometimes you will just have like just an hour, sometimes like 15 minutes to implement something. And working, for example, on independent branches allows you to move around and every day to add some more value to your application, move this task to done, and feel this accomplishment that will motivate you to do even more and to clean up this backlog of your ideas. So having this organized process, for me, it was really helpful.
Yeah, it's great to hear. So I hear a lot of you talking about, some things that you have to do around coding. So one idea that came from Marcin, having a backlog with priorities and just doing one by one. And then I heard also, Pedro, you mentioned something about creating some designs before starting the code. I don't know if I understood it right. So maybe you have some other things that you would like to share, like what to do to make sure that your time spent coding is efficient, right? That you are prepared to start working on the app, or also during the development. So Pedro, maybe you could share more.
I think Marcin touched a lot of of it already. So even before you touch the code or after you validate some ideas that you have, making sure that you organize yourself and figure out what's the most important, what's the bare minimum things that I need to do right now to get this off the ground. And it's fine to have this massive backlog of ideas that maybe you will, maybe you won't implement, but there's core ideas that can be broken down into workable chunks that you can then just take 1 or 2 hours and focus on that. In my case, I think 90% of it was 90% of the app was already defined before I started coding, because like you said, I had those wireframes. I knew that I wanted different layouts for mobile and for desktop, so I draw a bit. I have a notebook somewhere that has like 20 pages related to this project, just with ideas and kind of trying to wrap my head around what needs to be done, and then building a small backlog of tasks, of things that workable chunks, let's say, that I can actually take on.
Yeah, one thing I think worth adding is that when we are talking about some mockups, we are not talking about anything complex. As Pedro mentioned, this is probably his notebook with some drawings. So this is not something you have to spend a lot of time on. It's just, to help you plan what exactly you want to have and think about it before. Sometimes even wasting time to create it if you're not sure if this is.
Especially that you can get a lot of new ideas or understanding the problems in a different way after you see it. For example, I really like to draw things in pieces of paper, like small pieces of paper, and then make like a functional prototype. So I had a piece of paper with the UI kind of drawn in and a card that you could move around, and it lets you actually see how the experience will be like even before coding. So there's a lot of tricks that you can see and you can use even to kind of understand what is the actual problem and the different problems that you might have that you didn't even account for when you were thinking about it.
Marcin.
If I may, there are so many tips. I wasn't even aware that there are so many aspects of the project. But yeah, one more thing, because Pedro said earlier that to win the contest, you need to have like a very good code quality and documentation. And for me, also one of the assumptions before I started to work, and I really encourage you to do the same, is to pay attention to the code quality from the very beginning. Because here we said like something that you are doing some proof of concept, you are testing, and you will modify your ideas, and you might get an impression that you will start with something dirty, and maybe you will like clean it up later once this is kind of ready. And no, you won't clean it up. This will be like too massive spaghetti code, ugly, not organized, and you will keep adding some features, and finally you will end up with some buggy solution that is not you cannot extend this. It's not maintainable. So yeah, definitely plan your architecture. You can also like draw it on the piece of paper, but plan your architecture and pay attention to the code quality. It will be some investment, but really worth to do.
It's great to hear this, because when you think about something like Shiny Contest, my first thought would be, okay, yeah, it's just creating some app. It's not a huge project. But then when we talk about it, I hear that this is not that similar from the projects we have with clients, right? You have to make sure that you would plan. You have to make sure that you are prepared to start working on it. These drawings that Pedro is talking about, we're also doing it in our projects, not always on the piece of paper because of the situation that we are in, but sometimes, on Google Drawings or other tools that we could use to do it online. Okay, great. So the next question I would have is mostly probably to Pedro and Marcin, because as you can probably tell, their apps look much different than usual Shiny apps. I wouldn't probably guess even that this is Shiny. So if you could tell us how you were able to achieve it, and what tips would you give to someone who would like to improve their UI skills? Maybe you have some secrets that you can share with us. Pedro, you can start.
I don't think there's any secrets. I think I also cheated a bit because of my background. Because before I started working with Shiny, I did a lot of web development. So things like CSS, HTML, JavaScript, these are things that I was very familiar with. It did give me the opportunity to kind of see how could I extend Shiny using these web technologies. One of my biggest pain points was the layout itself, for example, simply because it's not your traditional Shiny layout. It's not even your traditional web layout. It's a very different layout, and I had a very specific idea of a technology that I wanted to use, which is CSS Grid. So I actually ended up creating a small package for this at the time that kind of had just a few functions, and this really let me have full control over the layout. Shameless plug here. This package actually evolved into Imola, which is a package that I released on Cran recently. So if you are interested in those very, very custom layouts, definitely recommend taking a look. Except for that, I think because of the amount of styling that I ended up doing, the amount of CSS that there was, I was also very, very happy that I had access to Sass as a way to organize it. We're talking about hundreds, thousands of lines of custom styling. So not being able to structure these and somehow and have a bit of a structure even just for the stylings was complicated. So if you're planning to do something very custom, I definitely recommend looking into Sass.
Okay, Marcin, anything you would like to add?
Yes, maybe that. Yeah, I was also a little bit cheating because my submission was like 1 year later, so I already saw like what kind of apps are winning. So I already knew that it it has to look like very different, like not a Shiny application. I personally don't think that my design is like nice. It's for me, it's like really ugly. But this is different. So like having this impression that it's kind of like brings your attention. It's the first like building block, and the second for me, it's making this for the user perspective a really nice intuitive process. So there is the manual, there is everything is explained, so there are some helpers, so there is this tutorial that Pedro shown. It's nice. For me also, I got a feedback that when you start a game, it's like super crowded. The users don't know what is going on there, and yeah, they are just lost and get eaten by the shark. So then I introduce, okay, there is some like timer that is getting you ready and is showing like that you can observe what's there. And so yeah, definitely paying attention to not only like the UI design, but to make this intuitive for the users, to pay attention to user experience. Yeah, JavaScript, I see some comments about like Shiny JavaScript CSS. Of course, Shiny JS is your friend when building those applications, and Sass, of course. Imola, I think I have the predecessor of Imola, so Shiny Grid package also used there. Really helpful.
Yeah, one thing that probably you can also do is look for the packages that would help you style your app. I'm not telling about going in the way that having a game created in Shiny, but at least to go with the app to the next level. So one thing that comes to my mind is Shiny Semantic, right? We have probably a lot of different alternatives there as well. But I understand like the first tip that you would give to someone who knows Shiny, but only Shiny would be to learn a bit more JavaScript. Is this a correct assumption, or?
I would maybe say CSS is a bit more important.
Okay.
So, JavaScript is very powerful, but if you're looking for something that already has the functionality, you probably won't need it. When it comes to the actual styling of the application, you did mention Shiny Semantic. There's also things like DSLib there's other UI frameworks also available for Shiny. But the important thing to know is that if you know even just a tiny bit of CSS and you can understand the HTML that gets generated by those components in Shiny, you can easily tweak these. So if you have a Shiny semantic button and you want to somehow change the font in it, this is something that you can do with just 2 or 3 lines of CSS. So when it comes to changing the way the components look, I think CSS is much more important than JavaScript.
Okay, great. Thank you. And thanks to Damian, who is answering some questions in the chat in the meantime. Thank you for your help. So if you would name one thing that you are the most proud of from the technical aspect in your app, what would it be? Agustin, would you like to start?
Sure. I mean, I think this is something that is not at all visible in the app, like from a user standpoint. But I think I can spend one whole day in this minimal issue that when you're using these kind of spatial objects with leaflet and you're zooming in, you get the width of these polygons that you're drawing there in pixels. So they're kind of constant. So if you zoom in, zoom out, they will always have this same width. But I didn't want that, because if like I was zooming in, I was just to follow like the width of the street, not just the width in pixels. So it seemed like a really trivial issue. I didn't find any like out of the box solution to this. So I actually went there and kind of dig up some trigonometry from high school, from university, some math, and say, okay, I can finally implement something I learned there, and just use some trigonometric functions to use some lines, adding some padding to the left, to the right, that will depend on what zoom you're doing. And then it kind of works like you saw, that when you start like from zooming out, it's really thin, and when you start zooming in, it gets wider. It was kind of a hacky solution, but yeah, for me it was kind of nice, because I could finally use this kind of knowledge I thought maybe was just there for, I don't know, showing purposes, or just on the library where I will never get to use it again. But yeah, it doesn't really show in that. It's not something you say, oh, okay, this is super showy stuff. But I guess it makes for a nice feature of the app, because if you have a small screen, it kind of makes sense to have this width depending on the zoom.
Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, it's actually interesting that you had to, remind yourself some math from the university to solve it. It's great. Pedro, is it Imola, like the result of the?
It might actually be, but I think one thing that was very unique that I was very proud of was the card generator. So because all of that generation is kind of procedural, it's based on templates and just lists of options. This is actually quite tricky to get started, but because it's all done in Shiny, it was actually super easy to kind of just collect all the information and output something based on a few different rules. So I'm very proud of it, even though it's kind of hidden in the middle of everything. And of course, Imola was also, I think, a very good achievement for me, because it was, I think, the biggest R package that I managed to release on Cran. And it's funny to look back and kind of see it all started here, like almost 3 years ago. This was like the first time that I actually even started thinking about that.
Okay, Marcin.
Yeah, maybe 2 things. Nothing super impressive, but I think it might be useful. So first one is in the game you are using your arrow keys to move the diver, and I haven't done before like capturing the keys in the Shiny application. So that was also, I was quite sure that this is possible, because why not? Shiny is capable of a lot of stuff. And yeah, with just some JavaScript, of course, that was possible. But that was like interesting process of actually building proof of concept of some feature that you are not aware how they are working, and something that you definitely need to prioritize to check before. So that's the one thing. And the second, I'm kind of think that this is really nice implemented in the application is management of all the objects that are appearing on the screen. So there is like a lots of them. There are those there's divers, submarine, some plants, sharks are moving, and the trash is like coming and going. So actually using the R6 classes, it's really helpful to manage it and to not get lost in like what trash is in, what trash is out. And it's with some small amount of code, it allows you to make it kind of like clear and nice solution. So yeah, definitely object-oriented programming might clean up a little bit and organize your thoughts and your objects in your application.
Great. I can see Agustin nodding, so this is something that you would support, probably. Yeah, maybe you have also some other... Yeah, Agustin, do you want to add something?
No, I was just agreeing. Yeah, it's a really nice, like, when maybe for many of us, like starting with R is from the data science perspective, and you don't really use object-oriented programming with R, and suddenly you realize that, yeah, you can do this, and it's really powerful. And even so, if you're kind of doing a Shiny application in a really organized way, it's super nice.
Okay, great, thanks. So maybe we could also talk a bit more about testing the app. You already mentioned some user tests that you have, but were you putting a strong emphasis on, having unit tests or things like this, or was it a waste of time because you had limited time to create an app in this case?
Let me check if I have any.
I can say that I didn't do unit tests. I'm very ashamed of this, but well, it is what it is. I do think that they're especially useful for big applications like this. A lot of my testing was more actual user testing. So just share it with 20 people, get some feedback, see if anything breaks.
Yeah, I think I can share the same story. But actually, in our games, I don't think there is like a lot of logic that you can test with unit tests. For sure, there is something, but yeah, the more important it was the user testing, getting the feedback, how intuitive it is. Always the biggest problem is that you know your application like too well, and you don't see things that are not working and are like not intuitive for the users. So yeah, I started like really often the user tests with all people I can involved. So probably you were all bored with me asking to like just click through and give me feedback. But that was like much more useful than unit testing. Of course, I encourage to do them, especially if there is like some calculation logic in your application. It will just save your time later if you modify it and break something accidentally.
Yeah. Agustin?
Yeah, I can also join the guys with the technical debt there, but yeah, they're important. In my case, it was not even a hallway test. When you kind of ask at least some people, it was just the girlfriend test. So she saw it and she was giving me feedback, and that was about it. At least I had a new set of fresh pair of eyes to take a look at the app. But yeah, it was kind of closed circuit of feedback.
Okay, great. Yeah, this is something that I would assume in this time frame. Let me just quickly check through the chat if we have some additional questions, because we have last 5 minutes. Okay,
I think there was one interesting, but it wasn't pointed to anyone, but I think it was about how to share the secrets when you're deploying the application, something like this. So for example, access to the data. In my case, it is, for example, the access to the leaderboard, and it can be done with the environment variables that you read in the application. So nothing is kind of like hard coded in the code. Don't do this if you access some database credentials or things like this. Use environmental variables. I think that's the best options. Maybe guys have some other options, and this is available to set it when you deploy to Shiny Apps.io. Yeah, definitely. I did it somehow, so it is possible. I don't recall right now how exactly, but if you are using RStudio Connect, there's really nice management for those variables. So every secret that you would like to place in the app, don't do this at code.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Marcin, for catching this up. Pedro, Agustin, I think I could see you nodding, so I assume that you agreed with Marcin, but maybe you have something to add.
I think he hit it nicely.
Okay.
Yeah. And in my case, this was everything. It was open data, so I didn't likely have to even think about this. But yeah.
Okay, so maybe last question, because we have only 4 minutes. So what is your go-to library that you use when you create Shiny apps, but not the obvious ones? So what's your favorite library to use?
Shiny.
Shiny. And not the obvious ones. So yeah, Pedro, do you want to start? Do you have something in your mind?
When I'm building very custom components, I very much enjoy using HTML tools, for example. It brings a lot of the things that I used to use in web development kind of back into frame. It helps a lot with those very custom structures that you kind of want to build.
Okay, Marcin?
Well, for me, there's always a problem. So I'm building like Shiny apps
All the time
for years, but it's always a problem like when you start up, like, oh, so how you were doing this? Okay, and I actually need to admit that I'm going to like RStudio, the like first tutorial block of building your app, to copy paste the code. So yeah, I really like some packages that are like building you the whole structure that is ready there for the use, with SAS, for example, with JS code folders, placeholder, and so it can be as easy as having like your own template of your favorite structure as a GitHub template. This might be working for you, but there are also like other solutions for this. Rhino is one attempt. You can hear about this later, but it's a new one, so it cannot be like my favorite tool for years. But yeah, that idea basically, so that I can quickly focus on actually like working and coding.
Okay, and Agustin?
Yeah. I think I can add just to the guys, maybe just to make interaction with JS for some custom functionality, like really small thing I want to just add there to the app. The Shiny JS package, I think, is quite intuitive and easy to use, kind of my go-to when I just want to add some minimal JS, like super fast. But then it always depends on like the actual app, what's going to be about. Like if there's a map, obviously you can see leaflets around there, SF, SP, some of the geospatial packages. But yeah, it kind of depends also on what's going to be the app about.
Okay, thank you so much. It was great to talk with you today. To all of the participants, remember that you can always reach out to Marcin, Pedro, and Agustin, and they for sure will be happy to answer more questions. So thanks a lot, and
Thank you.
I invite you to the next session.
Thank you.